Steve Harvey was holding a cell phone in the middle of the Family Feud stage when it started ringing. And before anyone could explain what was happening, Yvonne Harris dropped to her knees. She hadn't answered it yet. She hadn't even touched it. But she saw the name on the screen, Jaden, and her body simply stopped holding her up. Her hands hit the stage floor. Her forehead followed. 200 audience members watched a 42-year-old woman crumble at the sound of a phone vibrating in another man's hand, because the name on that screen belonged to her son, a boy she had not heard speak in 7 years, a boy who had listened to 2,555 consecutive good-night voicemails from his mother, and never once called back. Steve knelt beside her, held the phone in front of her face, and said 3 words that 296 million people would eventually hear. Answer the phone. February 7, 2020, a Friday afternoon in Atlanta. The Harris family, Yvonne, 42, her sister Janelle, 38, her cousin Darnell, 35, her best friend Rita, 40, and Rita's son Malik, 22, stood at the right podium in yellow. The competing family, the Chen family from Portland, Oregon, Michael Chen, 48, his wife Linda, their daughter Amy, 24, their son Brian, 21, and Michael's brother David, wore navy blue at the left podium. During introductions, Steve asked Yvonne why she was on the show. She said, "I'm here to win enough money to move closer to my son." Steve said, "Where's your son?" Yvonne said, "He lives with my mother in Baltimore." Steve said, "How far is that from you?" Yvonne said, 612 miles. She said the number the way a person says a number they have Googled 1,000 times. Precisely, automatically, with the exhaustion of someone who has measured the distance between themselves and the person they love. So many times the number has become a scar. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Yvonne Harris grew up in Park Heights, Baltimore, the second of 4 children born to Lorraine and Thomas Harris. Thomas drove a city bus. Lorraine cleaned offices at night. The apartment was small, and the neighborhood was hard, but Lorraine ran that household like a general. Homework checked, church on Sunday, no excuses, no exceptions. Yvonne graduated from Mergenthaler Vocational Technical High School in 1996, took a job at a hotel downtown as a front desk clerk, and by 22 had saved enough for a deposit on her own apartment. She was determined. She was organized. She was the daughter Lorraine pointed to when the other children complained that life was unfair. "Look at Yvonne! She figured it out." That sentence would become the heaviest thing Yvonne ever carried, because when she fell from a height that her family believed was impossible. Jaden was born on April 11, 2000. His father, a man named Curtis who drove delivery trucks, stayed for 2 years and left. No custody fight, no child support, just gone. Yvonne raised Jaden alone in a 1-bedroom apartment near Druid Hill Park. She worked the front desk from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and picked Jaden up from daycare at 3:30. They ate dinner together every night. She read to him every night. She said goodnight to him every night. The same 4 words, in the same order, from the day he was born. "Good night, baby. Love, Mama." It was their ritual. It was the last sound Jaden heard before sleep for the first 13 years of his life. In 2009, the hotel where Yvonne had worked for 11 years was sold to a new ownership group. The entire front desk staff was replaced. Yvonne was 31, a single mother, suddenly unemployed. She found another hotel job within a month. Lower pay, worse hours, a 45-minute bus ride each way. She lasted 8 months before that hotel cut staff too. She found retail work, Lost it. Found warehouse work. Lost it. The economy was still bleeding from the 2008 recession, and Baltimore's job market was contracting in the neighborhoods where Yvonne could afford to live. By 2011, she was working temp jobs, 3 days here, a week there, and falling behind on rent by increments that grew from manageable to impossible. The eviction came in March 2012. Jaden was 11. They moved in with Lorraine. Yvonne slept on the couch. Jaden shared a room with his uncle's 2 kids. Yvonne told Jaden it was temporary. She said it the way she said everything to him. With certainty she manufactured from thin air, because a mother's primary job, as Yvonne understood it, was to make the ground feel solid even when it was liquid. The audience thought that was the peak. They were wrong. Yvonne got a job at a distribution center in April 2012. The hours were 4 a.m. to noon. She woke at 3 a.m., took 2 buses, worked 8 hours on her feet in a refrigerated warehouse, took 2 buses home, and arrived at Lorraine's apartment at 1:30 p.m. She was exhausted in a way that transcended sleep, a fatigue that settled into her bones like concrete. A co-worker offered her something to get through the shift, a pill. Yvonne had never taken anything stronger than ibuprofen in her life. She took it. It worked. She had energy. She could function. She took another one the next day. Within 3 months, the pills became a need. Within 6 months, the need became a dependency. Within a year, the dependency had consumed her savings, her judgment, and her ability to hide what was happening from the one person who had always believed she had it figured out. Lorraine found out in June 2013 when Yvonne came home at 4 a.m. and couldn't walk straight. Jaden was 13. He was standing in the hallway when his mother stumbled through the front door with glassy eyes and a face he didn't recognize. Lorraine intercepted. There was no argument. Lorraine didn't argue. She said, "Yvonne, you cannot be in this house like this around these children." The next morning, Lorraine told Yvonne she needed to get help and that Jaden would stay with her until Yvonne was stable. Yvonne agreed because she was too ashamed to fight and too sick to argue. She packed a bag. She kissed Jaden on the forehead. She said, "Good night, baby. Love, Mama." It was 11 a.m. Jaden was sitting on the bed staring at the wall. He didn't say good night back. He didn't say anything. That was the last time Yvonne Harris heard her son's voice. Jaden didn't go mute. He chose silence. He was 13 years old, and the mother who had made the ground feel solid had become the earthquake. He spoke to his grandmother. He spoke to his teachers. He spoke to his friends. But when Yvonne called, and she called every single day, from shelters, from payphones, from borrowed cell phones, from rehab intake desks, Jaden wouldn't answer. Lorraine tried. She put the phone on speaker. She held it to his ear while he slept. She begged him to say one word. Jaden shook his head every time. Not in anger, in something worse than anger, in the specific, devastating withdrawal of a child who has reclassified his parent from safe to unreliable and cannot find the switch to reverse it. Yvonne called every night anyway, every single night for 7 years. When Jaden didn't answer, she left a voicemail. The voicemail was always the same. "Good night, baby. Love, Mama." 4 words. 7 years. 2,555 voicemails. She never missed a night. Not from the shelter in West Baltimore, where she lived for 4 months. Not from the rehab facility in Towson, where she completed a 90-day program. Not from the halfway house in Dundalk, where she lived for a year. Not from the sober living apartment in Silver Spring, where she finally stabilized in 2016. Not once. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. Yvonne got clean in 2015, fully, permanently clean. She completed treatment. She got a job at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated women find housing. She wasn't formerly incarcerated, but the director said her story qualified her for the work in ways a degree couldn't. She got an apartment. She rebuilt her credit. She started sending Lorraine money for Jaden's expenses. $200 a month, then $300, then $400 as her income grew. She sent Jaden birthday cards every year. She sent Christmas presents. She sent a letter on his high school graduation day that took her 3 weeks to write. Jaden accepted the money through Lorraine. He kept the birthday cards in a drawer. He never opened the letter, and he never answered the phone. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. The Harris family won 3 rounds. They were headed to fast money. Yvonne was sharp, focused, competitive in a way that surprised her own team. She was playing for the $20,000 because $20,000 would cover the deposit and first 3 months' rent on an apartment in Baltimore, 612 miles closer to the son who wouldn't speak to her. She scored 178 points in the first round of fast money. Janelle went second and added 41 points, bringing the total to 219. They won. The $20,000 flashed on the board. Confetti dropped. The Harris family screamed. Yvonne covered her face and bent double, and Janelle caught her, and Rita was jumping, and Malik was pounding the podium. Steve walked over, grinning, ready for the celebration. Then he saw Yvonne's face. She wasn't celebrating. She was crying. Not joy tears, grief tears. The kind that come when you win the thing you wanted and realize it doesn't fix the thing you need. Yvonne looked at Steve through the confetti and said, "It doesn't matter. He won't talk to me. I could live next door and he still won't talk to me." The studio fell completely silent. Steve stopped. The confetti was still falling. The victory music was still playing. Steve looked at Yvonne. Really looked, the way he does when something shifts behind his eyes and the host disappears and the man appears, and said, "Who won't talk to you?" Yvonne told him, right there on stage with confetti in her hair and $20,000 on the board. She told him about the pills and the eviction and the shelter and the 7 years of voicemails. She told him about "Good night, baby, love, mama." She told him about the 612 miles. She told it in broken pieces, the way a person tells a story they have rehearsed in their head 10,000 times, but never spoken out loud. Steve listened without interrupting. His face changed incrementally with each sentence, not into pity, but into recognition. "How many voicemails?" Steve asked. "Every night for 7 years, Yvonne said. Steve reached up and pulled out his earpiece. He set it on the podium. The producer's voice died in his ear mid-sentence. Steve turned to the production team. "Get me a phone, and get me the number for Jaden Harris in Baltimore." But Steve wasn't done. Lorraine had submitted information with the Family Feud application. She had been the one to encourage Yvonne to audition, and she had included Jaden's phone number in the family contact section, hoping someone, somewhere, might do what she had been unable to do for 7 years. The production team had the number. Steve dialed it. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The studio held its breath. 4 times. Steve's jaw tightened. 5 times. Then a click. A breath. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of voicemail, but the silence of a person holding a phone to their ear and not speaking. Jaden had answered. For the first time in 7 years, Jaden Harris had picked up. Steve said, "Jaden, my name is Steve Harvey. Your mama is standing right next to me. She's been calling you every night for 7 years. I think you know that. The line was quiet. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not your father. I'm not your pastor. But I'm a man who lived in a 1976 Ford Tempo for 3 years, who ate from trash cans and showered in gas stations, and who knows what it feels like when the person you needed the most wasn't there. And I'm going to tell you something an old man told me at a gas station when I was at my lowest. God's got a plan bigger than your pain. Your mama's pain is you, Jaden. You are her pain and her plan. And she is standing on this stage shaking because she hasn't heard your voice since you were 13 years old. The line was still quiet. Steve looked at Yvonne. He held the phone out to her. Answer the phone, he said. Yvonne took the phone with both hands. She pressed it to her ear. 200 people, and every camera in that studio, watched a mother hold a phone like it was made of glass and whisper the only words she had said to her son in 7 years. Good night, baby. Love, Mama. The silence held for 3 seconds. Then Jaden spoke. His voice came through the speaker, deeper than she remembered. A man's voice now, not a boy's. And he said 7 words that made Steve Harvey sit down on the stage floor because his legs could not hold him. I listened to every single voicemail. The studio fell completely silent. Then it broke. Every person in that audience made a sound at the same time. Not applause, not a gasp, something between a cry and a prayer. The crew was destroyed. The camera operator on camera 2 pulled his headset off and walked in a circle with his hands on his head. The lighting technician was sitting against the wall. Steve was still on the floor, his hand over his eyes, his shoulders shaking. Yvonne had dropped to her knees for the second time, pressing the phone against her face so hard the screen cracked. And she was saying his name. Jaden! 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 The way a person says a word they have been whispering into voicemail for 2,555 nights, and can finally say to a living voice on the other end. But Steve wasn't done. He stood up. He wiped his face with both hands. He walked to camera 1. Everyone watching at home right now, this woman left a voicemail every single night for 7 years. She never missed. Not from a shelter, not from rehab, not from the lowest floor of her life. She called, and she said 4 words, and she hung up, and she did it again the next night. That is not a phone call. That is a prayer. And tonight, after 2,555 prayers, somebody answered. Steve looked at Michael Chen, the patriarch of the competing family. Michael was crying. His daughter Amy was crying. His wife Linda had her hand on Michael's back. Steve said, I think we all know what needs to happen. Michael nodded. Steve awarded both families the full $20,000. He paid the Chen's share himself. He announced the creation of the Goodnight Fund, seeded with $250,000 from the Steve Harvey Foundation, dedicated to reunification services for parents in recovery, funding supervised visits, family therapy, transportation, and transitional housing to close the distance between parents who have rebuilt their lives and the children they lost along the way. Steve looked at Yvonne, still on her knees, still holding the phone, and said 5 words that would become the most shared sentence on the internet for the rest of February. Every mother deserves one call. The clip was uploaded that night. Within 48 hours, 51 million views. Within 5 weeks, 296 million across all platforms. The hashtag #AnswerThePhone trended in 47 countries for 12 days. Addiction recovery organizations across the country reported a surge in calls from parents seeking reunification resources. The Goodnight Fund received $20.7 million in its first year and funded reunification services for 2,900 families across 39 states. Jaden Harris flew to Silver Spring, Maryland on March 1, 2020, 22 days after the taping. He was 19 years old, 6 feet tall, with his mother's eyes and a voice that cracked when he said her name at the airport gate. Yvonne ran. She didn't walk, didn't compose herself, didn't care about the people watching in the terminal. She ran, and she held her son for the first time in 7 years, and she said goodnight to him in the middle of the afternoon, because it was the only language they had. Jaden told her later, sitting in her apartment, eating the first meal she had cooked for him since he was 13, that he had saved every voicemail, all 2,555. They were on his phone in a folder called Mama. He listened to one every night before he went to sleep. He had been hearing her voice for 7 years. He just couldn't bring himself to let her hear his. "I was angry," he said, and then, "I wasn't angry anymore. But the silence had been going on so long I didn't know how to break it. It felt like if I called back, I'd have to explain why I didn't call back for 7 years, and I didn't have an explanation." Yvonne put her hand on his face and said, "Baby, you just answered. That's the only explanation I needed." In a 2022 interview with Gayle King, Steve was asked about the moment Jaden said he'd listened to every voicemail. Steve closed his eyes and sat quietly for several seconds. "That broke me," he said, "because I realized she was talking to him the whole time. He was listening the whole time. The only thing missing was the courage to close the gap." And that's not a phone story. That's every broken relationship in the world. Somebody's talking, somebody's listening, and both of them are too afraid to say, "I hear you." In December 2023, Jaden Harris graduated from Community College of Baltimore County with an associate's degree in social work. Yvonne was in the front row. Lorraine sat next to her. When Jaden crossed the stage and took his diploma, he looked at his mother and pointed at her. A gesture the audience didn't understand, but Yvonne did. Because it was the same gesture she used to make at his school plays when he was small, pointing at him from the audience to say, "I see you." Today, Yvonne Harris is 46 years old. She lives in Baltimore, 612 miles closer than she used to be. She works at the Goodnight Fund's Maryland office, helping parents in recovery reconnect with their children. Jaden is 24. He works as a case aide at a family reunification nonprofit in Baltimore. They have dinner together every Wednesday. Yvonne still calls Jaden every night. Jaden still answers every night. And every night, last thing she says before she hangs up is what it has always been. "Good night, baby. Love, Mama." The only difference is that now, on the other end of the line, a man's voice says it back. A phone rang 2,555 times and no one answered. A mother said 4 words into the silence every night for 7 years because she believed that love doesn't require a response to be real. It only requires showing up. And on the 2,556th night, the silence broke. Not because the pain ended, not because the anger disappeared, but because a boy who had been listening in the dark for 7 years finally found the courage to say, "I heard you. I heard you every single night." Some calls are not answered when they ring. Some calls are answered years later, in a voice that has changed, from a person who never stopped listening. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to answer the call you've been avoiding, or to make the call you've been afraid to make, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications. Every week we bring you stories about people who refused to stop reaching out, and the moments when someone finally reached back. Hit subscribe. The next story might be the one that makes you pick up the phone tonight.